This is Ndtv, and you're watching Classics.
Hello and welcome to this very special half hour with Jeff Immelt. He's the chairman and CEO of GE. Jeff Immelt has been described as the most admired CEO, and he's CEO of the most admired company in the world. So this is rather special, most admired CEO of the most admired company. Thanks very much, Jeff, for joining us and spending the time with us. Of course, Jeff he's only 50, and he's been CEO for 7 years of a company, GE, that's been in India for over 100 years. So he knows about India, and he knows about the world. You followed a legendary Jack Welch. How are you different from Jack Welch?
You know, I think the times are what's different. You know, in other words, we're different people, but in many ways, the world today is so much different. You know, I would say if there were three concepts that I'm trying to bring to GE, it's innovation, it's globalization, and it's customer focus. So it wasn't that GE did those things poorly before, but I really believe that in my generation, these are the three most important things we can work on.
And globalization is a key factor now in your strategy.
For the first time in 2007, GE will be bigger outside the United States than inside the United States. And our business outside the United States is growing at twice the rate of our business inside the U.S. So we are in every way a global company.
And in India, you've got 12,000 people, employees, and $1 billion in exports?
In India, we've got, if you look at 2007, we'll be close to $3 billion in revenue, about 12,000 employees, not including Genpact.
Which is another 25,000.
It's another 25,000 people.
And you own 40% of that.
Exactly, and $1 billion of exports. So we are, we've been in India for a long time.
We've been in India more than 100 years.
More than 100 years. And we've seen every iteration, and I would say I'm so optimistic today that the promise of the market is finally being realized. I'm extremely optimistic.
That's what I wanted to ask you. You know, there is this buzz about India. Is it justified?
I think so, for two reasons, really. One is that the entrepreneurial class in India, that the executives, the managers, are really superior. I mean, these are top-shelf people, the Azim Premji, Ratan Tata, and all the people throughout. So you've got a management class that's totally superior. And the other one is, I think the economic power is being felt in the villages now. It's being felt in the countryside. It's more broad-based than ever before. And ultimately, you know, the power of markets is what will finally bust through bureaucracy to take India to the next.
That's what's happening. You say
that's
the
what's
power
happening.
of the market.
You know, I always say, you know, and this is also true, by the way, a little bit in the United States, is when the market gets more powerful than the government's ability to stop it, then you have true economic freedom.
Stage.
You have takeoff stage. And I think India is really in the takeoff stage.
Okay, great. But if you had to look at both sides of the coin, the risk associated, where will India be 20 years from now, and the returns in the next 20 years, how would you balance the risk-return profile?
Look, if I had $1 to invest in any country in the world, I'd pick India. Because again, I think the power of the market is unstoppable. I think India only has two weaknesses, I would say.
Right.
One is completely obvious. Everybody knows it. It's infrastructure, primarily energy. It's maddening.
Everybody knows it.
Everybody
knows
knows
the solutions.
it. Everybody knows it. The solutions are obvious, yet getting it done is so hard. So I always say smart people will figure that out. I think the other issue, again, is not unique to India, is how do you get economic confidence broadly spread throughout the society so that there's not a massive class schism that takes place. And I think if India can manage those two things, there's almost no stopping it.
Talking about this confidence, I'll come to the infrastructure and how GE and whether the private sector can really play a role in a long-term sector like infrastructure a little later. But coming to the confidence, everybody says there's a new self-confidence in India in the last 5 to 10 years. Have you noticed that?
I have, but what I would say is that it's not just about India. What I think where the confidence comes is you have companies, executives, who are now winning outside of India. You know, in other words, it's not just about India anymore. But when you have Wipro winning in the United States, when you have Tata buying Chorus Steel, when you have Reliance, a global chemical and energy player, that's the confidence that people stand up and say, you know, we can win on a global basis, and that's what brings real confidence to the society.
Some people say the only danger in the next 25 years, 20 years, will be reforms fading out, a lack of commitment to reforms with democratic pressures, populism, etc. Is that still a danger?
Sure. You know, again, what stops that is if people, middle-class people, get a taste of prosperity, they won't let the government stop. They won't let the government stop. And I think that's always a concern in India, but I think the momentum is profound. You know, look, I've been observing India for almost 20 years. Right. And the fact is that no matter what people say about political parties changing, they can't start over anymore. You know, it used to be that one party, you know, Congress would lose, somebody else would come in, and people would say, okay, the reforms are over. They're going to start from scratch. No politician in India can do that today. Right. So they basically are all cast upon building on what was in place before them, and that's a positive, not a negative. So I think there's tremendous groundswell for continuation.
You know, we have now, it's so different to what it was 20 years ago, we have $200 billion odd of foreign exchange reserves. Are you a believer that you should use, say, $20 billion to, in one go, and use it for infrastructure? China used some $80 billion of its foreign exchange reserves, got much more, of course, to get rid of its bad debts in banks. So should India use some of this foreign exchange?
You know, my answer is yes.
Yes.
You know, again, I think there's complexity, right? Yes, yes. And in a free market, I mean, China's a planned economy where the government can have its will. I think the regulators and the politicians in India are a little bit more concerned about doing that. But you know, look, there's not enough electricity. It's a profound problem. There's not enough roads. The government can step into these situations and use some of the foreign exchange to help facilitate that. And now's the time to do it.
Sort of a kind of structural jump.
Structural jump. You know, okay. Because again,
yes.
You know, look, I mean, do you want all of the foreign direct investment and things like that to go to real estate, ultimately? You know, do you want it to go into the stock market? It's a free market. People should be able to put money where it is. But if it just goes into real estate and the stock market and nothing happens with infrastructure, everything is going to cycle back on itself. And so I just think the government has to think about that.
Okay, on that we'll take a short break and back in just a moment to talk about India versus China, that usual question. But Jeff has just come back from China, so he knows these things firsthand. That's in a moment from now. See you then.